Oi oi, it's your boy, the hardest working man in MMA, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday the 21st of April, Easter Monday. I took 3 days off and I came back, like a certain other chap we all know. And it's bank holiday here, but it's not bank holiday in America, and it's not bank holiday in MMA. So I thought, why not put out some content? There were some fights over the weekend that you 100% did not watch because PFL's numbers came out for their last event, and it was something like 34,000 people on a TV network that everyone gets. It's bad. And I really think the GFL thing has hurt them too, because not only is there all this negative press about PFL, there's really bad press about GFL, and they sound almost the same. But it's not like PFL need help burying themselves. However, like I've said before, the fights normally turn out all right. You had a couple of good ones on there. I'm going to highly recommend that you go and find Alfie Davis versus Clay Collard. Spectacular knockout, which I saw in a GIF before I watched the fight, with a spinning back elbow. But where you normally throw a spinning back elbow overhead, think of any spinning back elbow knockout you've seen in MMA. Alfie Davis throws he brings his elbow back to his body like he's doing a traditional martial arts pulling hand. You know, when you whether it's taekwondo, karate, anything like that, the hikite, they call it in karate, where you pull your elbow back alongside your body. Like no one has ever thrown a back elbow. So I thought, wow, that's fortunate that Clay Collard ducked onto that in time. Watched the fight. Firstly, pretty good fight, very short fight, so you can watch it, and so it's easy to watch. But Collard pushes him to the fence and threatens to sort of wrestle him, even though Clay Collard's a very good striker. They break from the fence. Clay Collard level changes with a dipping jab, so he slips a jab and jabs the body. And then he throws a right hand to the body and a left hook to the body. And I went, oh, he's hunting the body. Marvellous. Brilliant work, Clay Collard. He's full of great ideas like that. And then Alfie Davis, he read him because he went to spin from one stance and Clay Collard didn't. Clay Collard faked before he stepped in. So Alfie Davis starts circling off in the other stance and then spins back the other way and hits him with this elbow that's just down where Clay Collard's head would be if he was level changing for a body shot or an attempt at a clinch. Absolutely stunning knockout. Highly recommend you watch that. JJ Wilson beat Mads Bennell by doing the Mads Bennell game. Lots of volume boxing, front kicks to the body, beating the guy up from top half guard, and then he threatened some Japanese neckties and darces in there too. So it really was like watching Mads Bennell get beaten up by Mads Bennell. Won't bother talking about the rest of those because they were all right. Rabadanov, who's the favourite to win the tournament this year, he was fighting Mark Jacasey, and Mark Jacasey, he like needled him with a couple of kicks, and Jacasey went, oh, I've had enough of that, and threw a hard left body kick back. And Rabadanov had clearly been waiting for it because he just parried it across himself, came back with some punches. The punches didn't hit Jacasey, but Jacasey fell over on his back, and then Rabadanov jumped on him and just threw punches until the ref stopped it. But I thought today I'd do some of those questions because 2 weeks ago I said, oh, Apex slop, let's get some questions in. And then I talked about the Apex for too long and we didn't do the questions. So questions from the Patreon boys on the Patreon thread. Mr. Kringleberry asks, Masaki Noiri article when? I suppose I've got to do it soon because we've got a nice break from him losing. Complete surprise when he sparked Tawanchai. It was also a fight where he was being made to look bad the entire fight, and then he just clapped him with a left hook. To be fair, like, there are lucky punches and there are lucky punches, because he was crowding Tawanchai the entire time, and Tawanchai was doing great when he was doing exactly what Sitachai had done: teep, move, clinch, make it hard for Masaki Noiri to get off his rapid-fire combinations and so on. And then the moment that Tawanchai said, I'm going to hit him with something big, he got clapped with this big left hook and was swinging around like a man in the rigging. But up until then, like any Japanese fighter coming to one, Noiri's timing with one head looked like a bust. He lost to Sitachai by being basically controlled the entire fight. And then he fought some Chinese randomer and lost. And then he fought some Iraqi randomer and beat him up with calf kicks. But 4 years ago, this guy went through the K1 Grand Prix like a buzzsaw through butter. And he's been fighting at that level since, well, I saw him fight live in 2012, probably. He's been fighting at that level for more than a decade. But I always say he's got the most... His defense isn't great. His ring craft isn't great. There's a lot of stuff missing to be like the perfect fighter. But if you want to watch someone who can knock anyone out with any limb and basically any strike. The only thing we haven't seen him do a lot of is elbows because he fights under kickboxing rules. Basically, both hands, both legs, both knees. He's knocked someone out with each of them, spinning from both directions, jumping, falling. He's done one of everything. And he's always trying something clever. So one day I will do an Noiri article, and I think I will probably do an Advanced Striking 2.0 on him because I think he's that significant. I think he's that important. The only problem is that he's got so much going on. It would be hard to sort of pick with Advanced Striking 2.0, I normally like to pick someone who does something special and focus on that something special or a couple of special things that they do. Matthew says, how many of the middleweight top 15 does Torres Finny beat if he fights just like he did Saturday? This was a few weeks ago. I'm saying at least 7 out of 15. God. I mean, the thing is that he's a tough fight. If you look at him, he's got this bizarre reach. He can reach down and ankle pick people from standing with his head in their hips. He's pretty good at getting in because it's not so much of a problem if someone just wants to lay and pray you and they're rubbish at getting in. Like Ben Askren just lumbering towards Jorge Masvidal or Sapo or any of those other guys who tagged him pretty big on the way in. We're always talking about how that's half of wrestling and MMA, being able to sort of box your way in so that you've got a decent attempt at getting them down. In wrestling, it's like the tie-up and the setup are as important as the finishing mechanics of the shot, or sometimes more, because a bad finish on a well-timed entry will still work. But I just dread the idea of Kopolov or someone interesting. Who was that lad who just threw everything last week? Hit the guy with everything in the kitchen sink. Anmar says, Danaher mentioned Habib's team, including Islam, trained at Henzo's once, with Nicky Ryan apparently surprising them. How do you think the highest level no-gi competitors would do in a match against Habib and his team? They've done things like this in AIGA, AIGA, I think that's how it's AIGA, but they get the best Sambo guys and they get the best no-gi grappling guys, and they have no-gi grappling matches, and either the Sambo guys win on wrestling by getting points and surviving, or they get horribly heel-hooked and then don't tap. They get their knee destroyed. You can go and watch Kolabate just run through a couple of guys who clearly don't have that much experience dealing with heel hooks, and he just shreds their knees. There's a thing where, if you train in the gi, you don't expect the gi stuff to cross over into MMA. But if you train no-gi now, the leg stuff is kind of far removed from MMA as well. It's not... You can use leg attacks in MMA, but most people use them wrong. They're not using them to redirect the opponent to start creating scrambles and stuff. They're there going, I'm going to try and finish on the legs. And finishing leg attacks on experienced opponents in slippery circumstances is hard already. Doing it when they can hit you in between every good change of position or every roll, it's tough. But it doesn't say when they went over and trained. I would obviously Henzo's Danaher at Henzo's is a long time ago now, and Nicky Ryan would have probably been a teenager, and he was a goofy-looking, gangly teenager. He wasn't the thick Nicky we all know and love now. So it wouldn't at all shock me if he surprised people, because he didn't look like he could do anything special, and he was pretty special. The weird part about the whole Sambo thing is that people conflate combat Sambo and Sambo. So it's always like, oh, Sambo's the national martial art and it's got striking. It's like, no, combat Sambo has striking. And most of the guys who are doing well in combat Sambo, or a lot of the guys doing well in combat Sambo, are like Fedor or Ankalaev, where they've got a good boxing background. Sambo is just like Russian judo with some leg attacks. And people used to say oh, Sambo's got the leg attacks. Go and learn the leg attacks from Sambo. Sambo doesn't allow heel hooks. I don't know if even Combat Sambo does. Combat Sambo allows headbutts, which is awesome, but you've got all these guys who are very high level in Sambo, and they're supposed to be known for leg attacks, or they used to be, and they don't know what they're doing when they're defending heel hooks nowadays. But whenever anyone says oh, the Sambo guys would run through so-and-so and so-and-so, it's like ADCC is an open tournament. You can go along and enter. You can get through to the World Championships. And people do. There are plenty of Sambists who enter the Asian or Eurasian or whatever trials it is, and still it's mainly wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys who get to the top. And in fact, to be honest, nowadays no-gi guys, they've sort of been, because they came out of jiu-jitsu gyms, they're known as jiu-jitsu guys, but nowadays no-gi's its own thing. It's just a sport of its own. Malcolm says, why do you think some gyms produce one fantastic fighter and can't replicate it? Thinking of TriStar with GSP. What makes it difficult to build on that success? Are some fighters really just built that different? Our coach is useless. No, Firas is still a very respected coach in the MMA world. The guys go to him to sort of fix up their careers afterwards. I've got a question about pendulum stepping later, and I've just watched a great little clip of Bivol. Someone's trying to do his like pendulum step jab to right hand on the bag, and Bivol says, "Why are you trying to do it like me?" And he elaborates, it's not like, why are you trying to do it like me when I'm so good? He says, why are you trying to do it the way that I was made to do it since I was a tiny child, instead of just trying to improve the way that you've always been doing it as an experienced boxer from childhood? And then he says, like, why are you trying to change your game at the core and so on? And I think a lot of trouble with changing camps and changing coaches is that people do try and rebuild fighters from the core. So I'm seeing Firas have a lot of success with guys who already had like jab heavy styles and a bit of wrestling. You know, he's got Cater and Font up there now, and I think they're a great fit for the style that he tries to impart on his fighters. Whereas when he had like Joanne Calderwood, Joe Duffy, I was sort of questioning like, what are you really doing there? Because Joe Duffy was a good boxer who opened up with punches and used counter punches and setups really well. He didn't need to be like the sort of behind the jab safety guy. He needed to be a little bit more aggressive and brave. But then again, you know, a coach, you only get to see what they do through the fighter who's sort of like a flawed conduit for their idea or whatever. So you never know how coachable someone is, how much they've taken on of what the coach was trying to say. It's very hard to... The only thing that I'll really slag off coaches for is if a fighter can fight, you know, has shown the ability to fight to a game plan and they come in with a really bad one, or if I hear them giving just corner advice that makes no sense at all or ignores the things that have been getting their fighter hurt, or if the fighter's getting absolutely battered and I think the corner should be throwing in the towel and the corner's being like, get out there and be a warrior or whatever. You know, those are the three sort of times that I'll happily criticize a coach. But you don't know how much is coming through in the fight. There are lots of places, though, that have produced the one great fighter, Conor McGregor, Straight Blast Gym Island. And it's like, I don't think everyone who trains at that gym is trash. I don't think everyone who trains at that gym is even not that good. I think there are a lot of decent fighters coming out of there, but you did have a really spectacular prospect for whom everything came together really well. And it's also like, you know, I've been playing a lot of Bellatrix, so I'm just going to... But, you know, luck of the draw on what your skills are. You can get through to the highest levels with a very small bag of skills, but in the right areas. And that's going to be sort of your natural aptitude for things in addition to the coaching. When I think of good coaching, I think of like... Jackson Wink back in the day used to do this, but nowadays, well, he's not so much around anymore, but for obvious reasons. But James Krause, if you can produce like a good run of journeyman UFC fighters who just smash their way through the regional scene with no problem and get to the professional level, or you know, get to the highest level in the sport, but not the highest level within that level, to get to the big promotion and be maybe 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 wins, 1 loss. You know, if you can produce a load of guys who can do that, I think you're provably a very good coach. Producing multiple world champions is a very hard ask for anyone. The task is made a little bit easier when people go to you, as in like if a camp gets a reputation for having like a number of... I mean, look what's happening with the Fighting Nerd now. Everyone wants to hang out with the Fighting Nerds. But back in the day, that was Jackson Wink. They would post their numbers of how many pro fighters they have. I think they got like 5 gyms in Albuquerque, and one of them is pros only, which is pretty impressive because most high-level MMA gyms are still running classes for people in the day and the evenings, and then they've got set hours for pro training. But Jackson Wink has one building that's just the pros, or did at one point. And to have enough pros in there that's viable and even necessary is pretty impressive. Like ATT is another big one, AKA... camps that have multiple champions, but also have like loads and loads of high-level fighters going there to train with them. I don't know if, Kavanagh gets shat on a lot, but I don't know if that many people ever went to Straight Blast Gym Island to train with them. Gunnar Nelson already had like a previous relationship with them before he got to the UFC. Johnny Walker went to them, and granted, he's still like a top 15 light heavyweight. But it's not like there are people flocking there from all over the world to, or even consider like the size of Europe, because you got people from all over North America going to ATT and AKA. And even Jackson Wink nowadays, even though they've sort of fallen off the face of the earth. Anyway, luck of the draw, also sort of not gelling with the fighter. I always think of Eddie Futch because he trained, granted it's all boxing, there's only 2 fists you can hit the guy with, but he trained some really different fighters to success. It sometimes even against the same fighter, like the famous example is Ali. He trained both Joe Frazier and Kenny Norton for Ali, and I think he trained a couple of others too. He trained like 4 of the 5 or 6 people who beat Ali, but to do it with so many different fighters, to be able to train them to exploit Ali's habits in their own way, because Ken Norton and Joe Frazier are obviously completely different fighters. To be able to produce high-level results from guys who are completely different body types, different styles, different natural attributes is, I think that's the mark of a really S-tier coach. Chris says, ideal game plan / style to defeat Iliot Tapia. I think there's stuff out there that we've seen work. Volume of striking works pretty well. I think if you go back to something like Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler, might have been 1, might have been 2, but Lawler wants to slip punches, and Iliot Tapia really wants to slip punches. I feel like he would rather show that he can slip punches than just, stand there and the punches not come close to him. I think he really wants to show you that he's got head movement. But if you get guys doing that, you can't move your head and be in position to check kicks at the same time. So pump out 2 jabs, 3 jabs, out in the open, keep the range like Volkanovski was doing successfully in the first half of their fight, and slam in some low kicks. I'd also be interested to see guys work with him in the clinch, because his 2 big wins have obviously been over strikers. Volkanovski is obviously a very skilled grappler and wrestler, but he didn't really engage in too much of it in that fight. I think Tapia's got it's the thing that happens with a lot of guys who develop striking in big power, and we go, oh, did you know that he was a gold medalist in so-and-so at the youth level or whatever? And it becomes like, well, and you can't even try and take him down because he's got that wrestling background. And it's like, well, no, if he's not been using it day to day, it's more like he used to wrestle and now he is an MMA fighter who really likes swinging on people. But I think there's a lot to look at with Iliot Tapia. I think I'll probably do an article on that at some point. Francesco asks, Jackie, what are your favourite combat sports movies or series? I'm asking this because I've never found any. All of the Rocky movies and the Creed and all the alike are more akin to a story of self-improvement, growth, more movies than actually good and realistic combat. Of course, I've already watched Hajime no Ippo. Hajime no Ippo is good fun. Rocky, it's kind of like Rambo. They became sort of parodies of themselves. But the first Rocky movie is the one that they teach in all the screenwriting classes, because it really is a beautiful movie. It's really well written. Everything is tight. There's subplots. There's a plot that goes bomb, 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 hits all the notes. Dialogue's great. Stallone is good in it. There were people calling him like the next Marlon Brando because he wrote it and starred in it. But it isn't a boxing movie. It's a poverty movie. It's a romance, but it's not really like about fighting. But nothing really is. I mean, anime is suited to that because that's the medium where you can do all the pauses for half the episode going, oh, he's using the gazelle punch or the whatever used by so-and-so, blah, 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 blah. Find out next week if I survive it. If you want good fighting, fighting is the thing for you. I love Ong Bak. Everyone loved Ong Bak in the early 2000s. But any Tony Jaa stuff, like I felt really bad for him because he was still doing the cool stunts. All his other movies have awesome stunts in, and they never caught on in the same way that Ong Bak did. It's like we all agree that's the coolest thing on earth, and then he did more of it, and nobody went and saw it or bought it on DVD. But real fighting's ugly, If you want to watch real fighting, it's been a long time since I watched Deadwood, but I always felt like their brawl in the street was pretty good, where they're like gouging each other's eyes and he drowns him in a puddle. Old Boy. Oh, I've still never seen Old Boy all the way through, actually, but the hallway fight scene, I've seen that 1 billion times because it's just, obviously it's choreographed. Obviously that's not how fights tend to look. But then whenever it's like, people come in one at a time, that's not how fights happen in real life. But if you do have a hammer and you're swinging it around, people are going to be willing to stand back a bit more. But I just love that fight because he goes in on all those guys. Then there's a moment where they all go, oh, we've done a lot of moving around. And they're all gassed as shit after about 30 seconds. And then the fight slows right down. And I just thought it was a really great little fight scene. I mean, obviously everyone thought it was a great little fight scene because it's probably the most iconic fight scene of the last 20 years. Absolute Pest asks, is there a historical period you think doesn't get the attention it deserves? Looking forward to your next historical pod. Loved the British in China podcast, that is. Loved what we did in China. Loved what the British did anywhere in the world. Well, I'm listening to the Once and Future King at the moment, so I'm getting back into Arthurian legends. But I'll be honest, I know almost nothing about medieval stuff, generally, because in the UK, history starts with the Tudors, which you study 100 times from school to whenever. And then you do World War II, and then it's back to the Tudors. Then it's like, see you next year. We'll be starting with the Tudors. The Stewarts, as an era, get almost no attention, even though there's some really interesting... I mean, The Favourite came out, and everyone went, what a crazy story. I can't believe someone wrote that. And then you find out that it's all real. Well, it's not real. It's a dramatised version, but she was real. The chick she was shagging was real. It's all the 9 lost children and keeping bunnies and things was all real. Stuart England just doesn't get a lot of attention, full stop. And in fact, when I was talking about doing a witchcraft episode, the witch hunts within England, or rather Britain, they stem from James I. I think he goes over to get his wife from Sweden or something, and on the boat ride back, he's almost killed in a storm. And he just decides that it was planned by witches. And then being a king, he's like, I'm going to be the country's foremost demonologist, and writes a big book about witches and stuff. And so the British witch hunts are very much removed from the European witch craze, but they're their own thing and they're very interesting. You've got Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General and all that, played by Vincent Price. Jacob says, who is one fighter you don't talk about that much that you feel deserves some attention? Could be a hidden legend or someone doing some cool shit at the moment that isn't a big name. I mean, I've realised that a lot of the time I sort of gloss over things like Anderson Silva, we all know how good he was, blah, blah, blah. Or George St. Pierre, we all know how good he was. But with the lifespan of the MMA fan being 5 years, a lot of people listening now won't have seen how good Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, BJ Penn. I mean, we all know BJ Penn now because he keeps coming up in the news for saying insane shit. Not insane, I don't agree with it shit, but insane, get that man somewhere safe shit. Those are the guys that, I think, well, people don't know how good they were, but there's sort of an era before that where their guys are obviously flawed, and I wouldn't pick them even in their prime against, the modern fighters of today, but you still sort of they don't get talked about enough for what they did do. People like Matt Hughes, maybe even Tito Ortiz. I mean, he's become a laughingstock because of his inability to talk, but insistence on being a public face. But, there was a little era where there were a few guys who were the best in the world and they don't really get talked about anymore. Just the other day, I brought up Evan Tanner because my favourite journeyman fought him, Ryushin Yanagasawa. So if you go listen to the Boycast for that, because he fought. You've never heard of him, and he fought everyone. And I'm not just talking MMA, I'm talking boxing, kickboxing. Scott says, best way to digest instructionals, and James replies rectally. I think it's tricky. The hard part of instructionals is approaching someone at an open mat or before a class or after a class and saying, can we drill something? But start at the beginning. The way most instructionals work is that the meat of it is at the start, and then you get into the minutiae of troubleshooting positions and so on as you go on. And that's what I love about modern instructionals. The topics can be brought down to a very precise, specific, it's specificity. It used to be you would buy so-and-so's six DVDs, box set, and one of them would have the information you were interested in, the guard passing or whatever, and the rest of it would be my half guard, my submissions from top side control, bonus DVD where I do yoga and lift weights. But now you are buying specific content to learn about specific positions and ideas. So buy a specific instructional, start at the beginning with what seems to be the meat of the position and the strategy or tactics that you're looking at, and work from there. You don't need the stuff later in the DVD or rather in the instructional, until you start hitting people with the first thing and they start answering it. And in fact, on that point of specificity of instructionals, I've been watching a couple. There's one about a guy with one arm put out his BJJ instructional for how he plays BJJ with one arm, a legit black belt. And there was another one by a guy with one leg. And I thought that would be fascinating. I'm going to watch those. And I've been really enjoying them because it's just, how people work around their own stuff is always interesting. But also being able to apply techniques with less control. I think, not in like less control as in like I break the dude's arm by accident. It's kind of like there are a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu like gi jiu-jitsu, who want to have 1 or 2 takedowns with one lapel grip. Maybe they're not as reliable. Maybe you're not going to blast through the guy. But if you can attack the guy with one grip, you don't have to do as much work to get it. So where you got like Mikey Musumeci and people saying you need all 4 limbs active at the same time to have an effective guard. If you can do it with 3, the other limb could be protecting you from strikes, or you just don't need to get as much to make something work. So I always find that interesting. Matthias says, given the dire state of heavyweight MMA, how well would the fighters from previous eras such as Krokop, Fedor, Big Nog, Josh Barnett, and Randy Couture fare in the current division? The Martin Boudet of punching the body in the clinch and kneeing them in the thighs blessed. It's easy to feel nostalgic and get the old rosy glasses, but I watched Josh Barnett even in like his most recent run as an old boy, learning new techniques and putting them on younger fighters. Actually, no, it wasn't even that younger fighters because all the top guys were still 40 at that point. But I can't help but think that someone like Fedor or Josh Barnett, a technically good heavyweight, Randy Couture, technically good heavyweight, would still have success in this division. Because, yes, you've got the odd monster, someone like a Francis Ngannou, the 270-pound beast of a man. But you've still got guys like Jailton Almeida is pretty big for heavyweight now, but Jailton Almeida and John Jones coming up. Even the ones that haven't had success, there's only 29 guys in that division, and there's like Kennedy and Nzechukwu and Ryan Spann. Anyone who doesn't think that Krokop or Fedor would take their head smooth off is mad. Even regarding those guys versus Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is a massive question mark because he comes out, gets hit on the chin in the first second of the fight and hits the other guy back and knocks them out. Like every fight is the same. I enter, I do something wild, I get chinned a little bit, but my chin holds up and the other guy goes down. So I think any elite heavyweight from the past, going back to maybe, the Colemans and so on are a little bit one-dimensional, and Coleman obviously also had an atrocious gas tank. Igor Vovchanchin I would see struggling with like the modern era of cage wrestling and so on. Even back to Big Nog, I think he would do well, probably. Granted, it's harder to submit people from the bottom and also in the cage from the bottom, and his wrestling wasn't super. So he'd probably be hurt by modern cage wrestling defensively. But any athletically gifted, skilled, technical heavyweight would do well at any time in the UFC, I think. Ryan says, advice on switching MMA teams when you have good personal relationships with the coaches. Ooh. Can you move across the country? Is that an option? Can you say, I'm moving across the country, so I'll have to move to a different MMA gym? It's tough. I don't know. Maybe just quietly stop turning up. Ryan also says, thoughts on the crackdown in MMA. I like it for slow-ass, unexplosive wrestlers / grapplers. I also like it because it puts the opponent in a position where they see your back and they're like, I'm going to go get that guy's back as a counter to this crackdown. But that's all. You've put them in a position where they're willingly wrestling with you instead of forcing you down their leg, trying to elbow you in the head, doing all the stuff that's horrible that's not wrestling while you're trying to wrestle the guy. Because that's the sort of asymmetrical part. When you're shooting single legs on someone, you are acutely aware that they can, if you stop moving and they're going to elbow you in the temple until you just slump. Rauno says, with Pat Sabatini's recent dominant grappling display against Joe Anderson Brito, do you think his style has the potential for a long-term success in the evolving MMA landscape, or will he need to diversify his striking and wrestling to reach the top of the featherweight division? I liked how he was throwing kicks to get kicks back from Joe Anderson Brito, because Joe Anderson Brito's a dummy, and goes, you kicked me? You're not even the striker here. I'm going to kick you. Oh, you've grabbed my leg. And he did it twice in the same fight. But Sabatini, his striking is a bit of a letdown for him. I really like what he does when he gets guys to the cage. You didn't see an awful lot of that in that fight because he was getting his takedowns clean out in the open. But there's been a couple of fights where he's been able to get the guy to the cage and sort of cycle through these takedowns. His coach had an interesting instructional there, actually, but cycle through these single legs, get the guy tripping over himself and picking himself up again and tiring him out that way. If he could just build the boxing into the cage, boxing to the cage into his game, basically every MMA fighter needs to learn how to jab and dip or throw punches, change levels as a defense, and step in. That's it. They need to learn how to get the guy punching back. And to get the guy punching back, you have to be there for him to hit a little bit. You have to be able to cover up, move your head and say, yeah, I'm going to be here, let's bang. And then the next exchange, you're on their hips and they go, oh, you dirty bastard, I thought we were going to bang. Ideally, you want every time you duck in on the guy's hips, he looks like he's been absolutely betrayed and he's disgusted by your lack of chivalry to not stand and bang with him. Alessia says, what do you think about Steve Morris? I think he has interesting concepts, but he seems to be not well known in MMA circles. Yeah, sort of an interesting guy. He's an interesting guy who was like into traditional karate back in the day in the UK. We're talking like, I think 60s, 70s. Was a doorman or something like that. He was just known as a hard guy, and he ended up breaking off from whoever he was with, and now he teaches people how to strike in a way that he sort of invented himself. If you watch any videos of him, he's interesting. He hasn't produced any notable fighters. I don't know if I don't even know if he's got a team, to be honest. But, not having success as a coach doesn't mean that someone's ideas aren't worth looking at or playing with. Hussein says, Olenek just got KO'd really badly in BKFC. What are some of your favourite moments of his, if any? Oh, I thought I was going to have to talk about BKFC then. They got him knocked out by Geronimo dos Santos, which was easy to see coming once they made, from the moment they made that fight. And the same weekend they had, who was the other old geezer they had knocked out? It was just like they got far enough away from when they murdered that dude to be like, let's do it again. Or let's at least risk it again. Because if you were if you gave me matchmaking license and you gave me a decently athletic old UFC fighter, or a washed old UFC fighter, I can get you a big knockout. It's not hard to do. And at some point, after watching all these fights, you realise that you don't care about people who've just been set up to get knocked out. The context is what matters. When an Iliot Tapia knocks out a Max Holloway, you're like, holy shit, he knocked out a Max Holloway. When 45-year-old Max Holloway gets knocked out in BKFC against surging young guy, it's not going to mean anything. And the moment you reach that threshold, you stop caring about like the BKFCs and all that other shit. And it's sad because the idea of bare knuckle I like. It's that specific promotion and how it's run. But then, if I ran a promotion, I'd do that too. So. George says, more of a request than a question. Please talk about Randy Turpin. Or the brother of Dick Turpin, the legendary highwayman. Now, Randy Turpin is a fascinating little story because he won the middleweight title off Sugar Ray Robinson, who was still the man, lost it in the rematch against Robinson, and then he had all kinds of trouble with Her Majesty's Customs and Revenue. What were they at the time? They were something different at the time, but had trouble with the tax people, as many fighters are wont to do. And he ended up, quote-unquote, killing himself, but there is some question over that. But it's a story that's a little bit more... the boxing part is almost the less interesting part of the story, but I'll have to dig out some books on him and maybe do a little... Well, I was wanting to do lightweights, but Sugar Ray Robinson's also a great story, and Randy Turpin fits into that. Maybe a series of podcasts on Sugar Ray Robinson, because that dude just spanned like 15 years of good boxing. Big Blungus says, there are a lot of guys I would consider technically sharp and clever strikers who still lose to worse technical fighters because they can't control the fight. What do you think are the keys to controlling things like initiative, exchanges, and pace? Great question. I think, my buzzword is ringcraft, but it's a lot harder to get into an exchange against your will if there's not a solid surface at your back. If there's nothing holding you there, you can circle out the side. You might take a punch on the way, you might have to take it on your arms or whatever, but you can move away and stop extended exchanges happening. So awareness of where the boundary is, whether that's a cage or ropes or the edge of the shipping container in Russian shipping container fights. But it's a very fine line between just running around the ring and controlling when things happen. I think one of the other things that's really underrated from a boxing perspective, and in Muay Thai, or maybe even kickboxing, this may be more the role of the teep, but the body jab is how a lot of really good technical fighters have kept control of exchanges and settled down their opponents. Gene Tunney also swore by the right straight to the solar plexus as like a, settle down, lad. We're going to be here for 10 rounds. Don't run at me again. Because people don't like running gut first onto things. They'd rather run face first onto them. A lot of experienced fighters. Getting poked in the stomach as you're moving in is really unpleasant. And you can take that to a bigger thing. You can get into good intercepting knees and so on. And then you're down into like personal preference. But being able to poke the guy in the body with something reasonably safe is another great way to slow him down. And of course, if he starts reacting to it and reaching down to slap away your teep or catch your teep or parry your jab to the body, you're opening up stuff that doesn't exist from his standard guard. You're opening him up in a way that's pretty conservative for you. And once you're talking about sports with kicks and things, man, you can hack that dude's legs or just tap him out when he starts stepping in. And never, ever, ever underestimate the significance of being able to force the clinch. If you can duck in on that guy's hips and come up chest to chest, if you can throw your arms over him and pull him in, if you can smother his punches, doesn't matter if it's allowed or not. They're not never going to DQ you for it, but they're probably never going to DQ you for it. Over and over again, I look at great boxers, and it seems like the ones who have a little bit more knowledge about how to tie up and how to break tie-ups control the fights. I've been watching loads of Willie Pep for an Advanced Striking 2.0, and I did a clip of him arm dragging Sandy Sadler, which I put up on my Twitter. But I've encountered about a dozen clips of him hitting someone, them clinching him, and them clinching him with their lead arm sort of low, and he just grabs behind their elbow and pushes it across his body and comes out behind them. It's an elbow pass, but in like a boxing context. And just like him knowing that, and the opponent not really knowing what to do in the clinch, not knowing that they need to anchor themselves to him. He has all kinds of fun, because if that happens, if you push the guy's arm across you and then turn to face him, you've broken the clinch and you're out in the open, and the ref hasn't said break, so you can still hit him. Hector Camacho used to be very good at that, just like turning up behind the opponent, teleporting behind you and saying, "Nothing personal, kid." Miguel says, who do you think are good finishers in combat sports that don't rely solely on power? People that when their opponent is hurt or when the opportunity to finish them presents itself, they don't fuck around and they get the job done without overcomplicating it. Now, people will be mad about this, but I'm going to say Michael Bisping. Because it was always, pillow fists Bisping, can't break eggs with his punches, blah, blah, blah. Then you look at his record and he finished a lot of people through volume and pace. And when he got guys hurt, he would dig legit punches to the body. If you watch his fights with Kung Lee, dig in big body punches, winding up on those once he's got the guy sort of like covering up. But his big thing was get the guy covering up, grab behind the head with both hands and start kneeing. Because no matter who you are, it's hard to be pillow-fisted with your knees. But also that prioritization of body shots. I think when you've got a guy hurt, and this has been true in boxing for almost 100 years at this point. They were teaching people this in their 40s, and Sugar Ray Robinson, I think, says this in his autobiography. But when you've got someone hurt, the first thing they do is cover up their head. So if you go to the body hard, then you could finish them. You could go body, head and come up and hurt them again, or knock them out with the punch to the head. Or you're just getting free rein to hit them in the body, and they're going to really feel that later on if they survive. I think overwhelmingly the bad thing I see, or when I see someone who I would consider a bad finisher, they hurt the opponent, they run in clubbing their guard, like left, right, left, right, left, right. They get tired, they step back, and they go, whoa. They either go, I'm going to have to slow down for the rest of this round or fight, or they just gas themselves out fully and get hurt in return. When you watch someone good hurt the opponent, they move in, they look at where their guard is, and then they start slotting things in. I'm not saying you have to pity-patter body jabs, but if you start digging the odd hard body shot, good hard low kick, when the guy's covering up worried about getting an overhand to the head, at some point he either has to defend the other stuff or let you beat him down with those. Jack says, favourite no-gi takedowns. I know it's very broad, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Big fan of the snatch single, particularly the inside reach, getting behind the knee tendons. There was a video I encountered on YouTube years and years ago. It was Championship Wrestling, which was sort of predates the current type of instructional. I think they were still putting out DVDs, but it was a lad teaching a double leg without hitting, no knee down penetration step, which is important for jiu-jitsu. You don't really want to go to your knees very much. But he stood in his stance, he put both hands forward and slammed them into the guy's shoulders as a shove. And at the same time, he brought his back foot up underneath him so that when he retracted his hands after shoving, he could step forward with his lead foot and drop levels and just hit a double leg while still on his feet. And I've used that so much over the years. I call it the lanky, unathletic white boy double because that was the guy who was showing it. But I really like it. Shove at the same time as your back foot comes up. As your elbows come back to your body, you step forward with your lead foot and drop levels. So it's a little 2-part move, but it works so well. And anything that comes off shoulder pushes, posts, I love that. But I love Frankie Edgar, post singles all the way. The post single is if the guy is in a stance with 1 foot forward, you slam your hand into his lead shoulder and put the other hand just behind his knee. And you shove him backwards so that his weight comes off that lead leg and you're just left holding it. It's not about picking up his leg. It's about shoving him backwards and getting his weight off that leg while you're sort of loosely holding behind it. If you watch Frankie Edgar's career, he just did that in every fight because it looked like a jab. He'd go jab, body jab, post on the shoulder. The Faber fight is fantastic because he just throws Faber past him. And Faber's got really good takedown defense. But again, it's the setup. If you set it up with the boxing so that you're already so far in, the guy doesn't have time to change modes and be like, whoa, we're wrestling now. Patrick says, who's the heaviest fighter you would think Pantoja would have at least a 50% chance of beating? I mean, it's got to be someone like Curtis Millender. Someone who, if you touch their legs, they just fall over and give you their back and get strangled. They used to say Frank Trigg could be rear naked choked by a turtleneck. And that is really the case with Curtis Millender. Right, I've been going a little while. I'm going to save some of those questions for another episode at some point, but just wanted to get something out because, I don't know, I don't like sitting still. I don't like not doing anything. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Have a great Easter. Eat tons of chocolate. I already have. I've sworn it off for life now, as always happens at Easter. Okay, never again. And I'll catch you later in the week for the Boycast. We've got actually a really good UFC card coming up. Pratis versus Gary. Lots of stupid stuff I feel is going to be said before that by one participant in that event. And but there's other good stuff on there too. And it looks like a lot of fun. We're also back in Kansas City, so I imagine Invicta are going to do an event the night before and be like, do you like worse MMA? Get down to Invicta. Oh, and don't forget to check out all the stuff I did last week. I did an article about Volk versus Lopez. I did a film room on the Scottish Twister. And then I did a Boycast. I was all action last week. It was like 4 things I put out. So I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, be a boy, and I'll catch you later in the week. Remember to watch Alfie Davis's back elbow bless.